They did it because they hated Israel. There was rivalry there, jealousy there. Look at what he says in verses 15 and 16. The way you have done, it'll be done to you. What you have done to the Israelites will be done to you. You'll get carried away captive. You'll get into captivity. You'll have your land gone. You'll have your possessions gone. You're going to lose things because you've touched my people. And then in verse 17, upon Mount Zion shall be deliverance, and there shall be holiness, and the house of Jacob shall possess their possessions. He gives the people of Israel hope that they'll come back to possess what was theirs. Once they repented, they came back and they possessed the land again. Let's take a look in Joel chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. Joel chapter 3, beginning at verse 1. For behold, in those days and in that time, when I shall bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. And they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for an harlot, and sold a girl for wine, that they might drink. Yea, and what have ye to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the coast of Palestine? Will ye render a recompense? And if ye recompense me swiftly and speedily, will I return your recompense upon your own head? Because ye have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried into your temples my goodly pleasant things. The children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto the Grecians, that ye might remove them far from their border. Behold, I will raise them out of the place whither ye have sold them, and will return your recompense upon your own head. We think of human trafficking as being a new thing. It's not. This scripture is an example of human trafficking that was taking place there in biblical times. The Israelites were being taken and sold so people could enjoy the money on things they wanted. They were being sold into places far away, the Grecians, that would have been Greece. So they were actually taken all the way to Greece to be sold. And so you had this going on, and God is telling that he is going to bring his people back. And the people who have taken Israel captive, God's going to settle the score with them. They're going to suffer some of the same things. God has the last say in everything. God has the last say. He has the final say. And if we're done wrong, one of the main struggles for us as humans is we want to retaliate. But you know what? If we'll just give it to God, God has the last say. God will take care of us. He will have the final say. It might be that he'll wait until Judgment Day, but he'll have the final say. And we've just got to give it to God. And that's basically what he was doing here, is he was giving his people hope. And at the same time, he was letting these countries know that he would exact revenge upon them when the time came, that he would have the final say in the matter. Yes, ma'am. Let's look at verses 20 and 21. But Judah shall dwell forever, and Jerusalem from generation to generation. For I will cleanse their blood that I have not cleansed, for the Lord dwelleth in Zion. Israel is different from many nations that have suffered the exiles and the wars and the measures that have been taken against them. Very often, when a nation suffers as much as they have of being taken captive by other nations, they just mingle with other people and intermarry, and before you know it, those people are gone. That country's gone. That nation is no longer existing in the way it was. But you can go to Israel and you can meet people who can trace their identity all the way back to Abraham, all the way back to that covenant relationship. Because part of God's commandment to them was for them not to intermarry, not to intermingle. And some of them did, but some of them have kept God's commandment and they've kept their identity. And Israel still exists in spite of what other nations have done. When Israel, in 1948, when those Jews returned to the land of Israel, and there was that brief war where they took back their land, there were only about 700,000 Jews there in that region in 1948. We're here about a little less than 80 years later, and that number of Jews has grown from 700,000 to more than 7 million. Why? Because they're living where God commanded them to live, and God has established them there. And He's allowing them to grow in size and prosper. 700,000 to 7 million in about little less than 80 years. That's a lot of growth. It's a whole lot. That's a population explosion. Because they're where they belong, and God is declaring blessing on His people. Let's look at Zechariah 2, 6 through 9. Zechariah 2, 6 through 9. Ho, ho, come forth and flee from the land of the north, saith the Lord, for I have spread you abroad as the four winds of the heavens, saith the Lord. Deliver thyself, O Zion, that dwellest with the daughter of Babylon. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, after the glory hath He sent me unto the nations, which spoiled you. For he that toucheth you toucheth the apple of His eye. For behold, I will shake mine hand upon them, and they shall be a spoil to their servants. And ye shall know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me. God sent a message of love to His people to come out of Babylon and come home, because He loved them, and they had suffered long enough. They had been in captivity for 70 years. 70 years they'd been there in Babylon in captivity. And after that 70 years, God's prophecy of that was fulfilled. And He brought them back, and they rebuilt Jerusalem. Some of them had rebuilt a life in a foreign land. Some of them had settled in, and they got comfortable there with the enemy. For some of them, it was difficult to return to Jerusalem because they had grown comfortable. Sometimes God might send us somewhere for a season. We've got to be careful we don't get comfortable there, so that when God calls us into a new season of our lives, we can pull up roots and move on. And it's not an easy thing sometimes for us to do. We don't, as a human race, we don't like change. I very much don't like change. I'm very much guilty of saying, well, back in the days of Jeremy James being in school, we could, and y'all can just fill in the blank what finishes that statement. Can't do that anymore. You know, the discipline has changed. Our culture has changed. The attitudes of people toward authority has changed. And that's difficult for us, you know. And we just have to pray for God to help us. When things change, we just got to pray, God help me, because I'm struggling with this right here. And God will help us. God helped His people to go back and rebuild Jerusalem. ask you this morning, what have you built for yourself in your life that God is calling you to leave behind? Have you built something somewhere in your life, and God's calling you back to a place of fellowship with Him, to leave behind what you've built, to take on what God has for you? See, sometimes because we can't see the full picture, sometimes we want to stay in Babylon. Sometimes we want to stay there. You know, if there were people that had been there for 70 years, a lot of your older people had passed away. And your younger people, they'd got used to Babylon. Plenty of food to eat, you know, taken care of pretty well. You know, why would we go back and have to rebuild something that's trashed when we've got a house here? They couldn't see the full picture of God's plan. They need to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild Jerusalem. There was coming a Messiah that would minister at that temple in Jerusalem. There was coming a Messiah that would be born in that holy land that they had left behind. Christ wants to do something in your life, but He can't do it if you're camped out in Babylon. You got to leave it behind. Leave it behind and go with God to wherever He's calling you. Is it going to be easy? No. Is it going to be comfortable? No. Is it going to be exactly what you want? I can guarantee you not. But is it going to be a blessing to you when you obey God? Absolutely. Will you have the strength to do what God's called you to do? Absolutely. Will you be able to bless others? Absolutely. Leave it behind and go where God has called you. That's what they had to do. For them, the work in front of them might have seemed impossible. Those invading armies had just basically destroyed the walls that surrounded Jerusalem. It was rubble. Their homes, a lot of their homes were gone. Can you imagine going to a place where you had to start from scratch and rebuild? Gruetli has a history of Swiss immigrants coming here. I don't know how many of you know the history of Gruetli, but there were people who immigrated here from Switzerland. They were told that it was a beautiful land here. It is. They were told that there was rich farmland here. There is. They were told there was a year-round growing season. That was a lie. And those Swiss immigrants arrived here in November. Came with their cuttings from their grapevines. There are still grapevines growing in Gruetli who had their origins in Switzerland. They came with their seeds, excited. They'd bought 100-acre tracts of land. And they were going to own 100 acres of land in a country that had a year-round growing season, according to the advertisement. Some of them left here. They left. I mean, what are you going to do? You're coming in November with the expectation of planting a garden. And it's November. We know what it's like on this mountain in November. There's no garden planting going on. If there is, somebody needs to check your sanity. Can you imagine them coming? They'd left everything behind. They probably didn't have the means to go back. There's no telling what it cost them for passage to America, plus the land they had bought. They didn't have the means to go back to Switzerland. And here they are in a land where there's nothing except what they've brought with them. Some of them left. Some of them still have descendants who live here. Some people can still trace their ancestry back to those Swiss immigrants that held on They dug in the middle of a harsh winter and held on. And spring came. And they stayed here. We might look at where God's calling us and go, there's no way. There's no way that I can go there. I can't do that. That's work that's beyond what I can do. And if we do that, we're going to miss God. We're going to miss a blessing. We've got to hang on. We've got to look and say, God, whatever it is you call me to do, I know that the work that's in front of me, if I'll hang on, I'll be able to do it, and you'll bless me. We've got to do that. Because if we don't, we're outside of the will of God. Sometimes we look at things and we say, well, that's just impossible. There's no way I can do that. We need to stop saying that. We need to stop saying that. We need to say, well, I don't see how I can do that by myself, but I know that with God, all things are possible. That's what we need to do. That needs to be our words. When we're met with a challenge, and I'm telling you, life will throw challenges at you. My faith was shaken this week to the core. To the core. When Steve called me Monday morning at work, his words to me were, hey, they've got Morris in the emergency room. He's got a brain bleed or something. And I'm telling you, I lost it. I lost it in front of those kids. They were on break in the hallway, and listen. I was a nervous wreck. I was down. And then we got there, and, we were there with him, and he looked okay. But we knew something was wrong. And then come Wednesday morning, when they came out and told us the diagnosis, I pulled up the diagnosis on Google. It was a bad idea, Sister Felicia. It was a bad idea. Because it was all gloom and doom. It was all negative. There was nothing in what I read from one of the number one hospitals in the world. Nothing I read that had any hope in it. Nothing. Listen, I was done. I was done. I looked at Steve as we were coming back home Wednesday morning. I said, I just don't understand. And in my mind, I was saying, God, you've got to do something, because this can't be happening. This can't be right. It shook me. It shook me. I just taught a lesson Sunday morning about God being a just God. And in my mind, I'm thinking, where's the justice in this? Where's God in this? But you know what? I worked through it. I prayed. And I said, God, His salvation is more important than anything else. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to hold on to the promises of God and know that with God, all things are possible. And if God heals him, listen, I'll be rejoicing. And if God takes him on, but his soul is ready to go, I'll still be rejoicing, Brother Jeremy. Because in the end, it's that eternal life that matters. This life on earth is just a vapor. You're here and you're gone. The older I get, the more I understand that. I look back on my life, I'm nearly 62 years old, and I think, where has 50 years, because I can't remember much from, little bitty times. Where has 50 years gone? Where is the past 15 years gone since Steve and I married? Where's time gone? Life's a vapor. But we serve a just God who takes care of us. He has great love for us. And He'll take care of us and He'll see us through. Let's look at verses 10 through 13 in that same chapter. Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for lo, I come, And I will dwell in the midst of thee, saith the Lord. And many nations shall be joined to the Lord in that day, and shall be my people. And I will dwell in the midst of thee, and thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts has sent me unto thee. And the Lord shall inherit Judah his portion in the Holy Land, and shall choose Jerusalem again. Be silent, O all flesh, before the Lord. He is raised up out of his holy habitation. You know, it struck me as I was studying, and I read verse 11. It says, and many nations shall be joined to the Lord in that day, and shall be my people. God declared way back in Zechariah chapter 2 that it wasn't going to be all about just Israel. He said right here, many nations shall be joined to the Lord. God chose Israel to start the journey. And he chose all of us to walk with them, to become a part of God's family, to become a part of his chosen people. We can rejoice now, but there's a day of rejoicing coming that far exceeds any rejoicing here on earth. There's a day of joy coming when God will be dwelling in the midst of where we are. God will be with us. He'll be the center of it all. I encourage you today, and as you go forward this week, to cast aside everything that's unholy. Leave behind everything that is not a part of God's plan for you. We can have things in our lives that are not necessarily sin, that is not a part of God's plan. You know, we look at sin as, stealing and killing and lying and cheating and, but you can have things in your life that take the place of doing what God's called you to do. That's called idolatry. And we don't always readily recognize that. We need to search our hearts, Sister Felicia. I have to search my heart. God, am I doing what you've called me to do? Am I in the center of your will? Or am I dabbling in things I have no business messing with? Am I putting things ahead of you instead of putting you first? Because I think we all do that at times. And God's calling us to set that aside and to enter into his love and his blessings, his favor that he has for each one of us. God bless you this morning.